So, this is a thing we do for my YouTube channel called 5 Favorites. It's mostly just a way to have some structure, to have a conversation with somebody that I want to have a conversation with. So we're going to do Christopher for a half hour, and then Mary Robinette will come out. With Christopher, you pitched the topic. You said favorite sci-fi video games or shows?
Right, TV shows.
TV shows. So I actually, I've done enough of this that for me, I narrowed it down just a little bit. So I narrowed it down. For me, it has to be obviously sci-fi, so no fantasy.
Okay.
It has to be been a show or a video game. So no movies or things like that, or books. And I was looking specifically at the world building. Because I've already kind of told people my favorite shows and my favorite games and things.
Yeah.
So now I'm kind of taking a different tactic. These are my top 5 favorite worlds, science fiction worlds, okay? You don't have to follow that structure, but I'm gonna pull mine up here.
No, it was actually horrendously difficult figuring out what top 5 things to do because I was in the middle of editing and then starting touring, trying to figure this out. And
yeah.
It's top 5 things are hard to figure out.
Yeah, and they don't have to be your absolute top. It's just 5 to talk about. I do rank mine generally, but we can give you're welcome to give any caveats you want on this. It's mostly just a way for us to chat.
Awesome.
Shall we tell them how we first met?
Yeah.
Do you remember when we first met?
Yeah, it was Comic-Con.
Comic-Con in San Diego. Like we were both like, when was this? This must have been like 2010 or something.
Just about.
Yeah.
Just about. You were just on Wheel of Time.
Just on Wheel of Time.
Yeah, because I remember because you were running back to the hotel room to write chapters.
It was so. Had any of them come out yet?
I can't remember.
Maybe it was probably
the
2009.
First one. Maybe
yeah.
the first one. But I remember we had dinner with Pat Rothfuss.
Yep.
And the two of us, and then afterward, I was not on Twitter, and someone forwarded to me your tweet saying that I ate like Goku. You
still eat like Goku, right?
I ate a lot of food that day.
Yeah. Like we went to and you ordered a steak, and then you're like, I need another steak. And they're like, really? You just ate like a 28-ounce ribeye, and you're like, yeah, I think I need another one for dessert.
I have a confession to make.
Yeah.
After we had dinner last night, I went back to the hotel and ordered more meat.
Yeah, I mean, so Christopher's signing went long because he's fantastic and popular. And he was going to have dinner with my family, but we got a text saying, he's probably going to be here for a little while. Then we got another text saying, he's going to be here for a long while. And so I know Christopher, so we'd made roast beef and potatoes, but we just all ate. We're like, we're not waiting for Christopher.
Yeah.
It was warm, it was ready. We had my parents-in-law there, so we ate, and then we just like, well, maybe he'll show up, maybe he won't. He did, and Christopher just came, he's like, oh, that looks good. It was cold, and he was just like, no, I like it this way. And he like basically ate a potato with nothing on it, just like, and then a bunch of roast beef that was just cold in the Tupperware.
Because cold's better because you can eat it faster.
Yeah.
When it's warm, you have to worry about burning your mouth.
Yep.
My mother has despaired of me her entire life.
And then you went home, got some more meat.
I did.
Nice.
So,
let's
talk about these things.
We start. Usually, I let you. So let's see. I start with my number 5, and we go to yours. That way, you get to end with your number 1. So I'm going to start with my number 5.
Awesome.
And so these are my favorite worlds specifically, and I put number 5 as The Expanse.
Ooh.
Yeah.
So I have a confession. This is a horrible confession. I have bounced off the television show twice now.
Okay, here's my horrible confession. Even though we're talking about TV shows and not books, I haven't caught up on the TV show, but I've read the books. And the books are really well done.
That's what I've heard.
So
what is it about the world building you like so much?
So what I love about the world building of The Expanse is it is really hard to walk the line of hard science and what we call in the business grokability. Yeah. This is an old sci-fi term of it's if a lot of hard science fiction, like I enjoy like Red Mars, Ken Stanley Robinson, but it feels like you've got to have a PhD to really understand Red Mars, right? And a lot of the hard science fiction has this feel to it that when you're reading it, you're like, it's going over my head. I don't, the technical jargon. And what I love about what Daniel and Ty did with The Expanse is you read it and it feels like space opera, but it follows hard science fiction rules.
So I love that you picked The Expanse, because that actually, so my top 5, aside from the first one, the number 1, are basically all on an even playing field in terms of preference. So I'll put relate this to my next one, which is, because it's funny you mention that, because they used a reference when creating the science for The Expanse that I also used, and the writers for what I'm about to mention also used, which is the Mass Effect video game series.
Okay.
Have you played that?
I have played the Mass Effect video game series.
And the reference is this amazing website called Atomic Rockets.
Okay.
And Atomic Rockets is created by a guy who was frustrated by the lack of science in science fiction. And so the entire website is a reference website for authors, and it includes everything from like hard sci-fi or hard science to speculative things like faster than light travel, and how could it be done and what are the implications. So I mainlined that whole website, and I know the writers for The Expanse did that, and the writers for Mass Effect did that. And
awesome.
That's why I think Mass Effect holds up as well as it does in the world building.
It's interesting you should say that, because when I write science fiction, I do my best to break the brains of the scientists that I bring on. You can ask the Arcanists, a lot of them are here. I don't want to do the normal stuff. I want to do the, so what if there were an ocean in the sky? Or what if the planet were really, really small but super dense? I kind of start with the fantasy idea and then try to justify it. And my poor Arcanists, I love them. They come to me and they're like, Brandon, we're trying to make this work. But yeah.
There's a great channel on YouTube by a guy called Isaac Arthur. And he explores a lot of speculative science stuff like that, and one of my favorite things is orbital rings, which are theoretically possible, and I would love to have them in reality, but yeah, lots of crazy ideas like that.
So you said you used, remind me of this resource.
AtomicRockets.com, something like that.
Okay, and so your number 5 is Mass Effect. Why? What do you love about Mass Effect?
I like the RPG elements, but I like the universe. I like the setting. I like the fact that really their big jump is they assume the existence of this element 0 that allows, if I'm remembering it correctly, that allows for all of the technology, and then they don't break the laws of physics past that. They assume there's one break from what we know and then explore that. But I love the setting. I like how much blue they use. Seriously.
Mass Effect is actually my number 2.
All right.
And so we can talk about that. It's interesting because as I understand, maybe someone in the audience can correct me if I'm wrong. As I understand, the old folktale goes for this, that they were BioWare, who made Mass Effect, was doing the Star Wars video games. They did Knights of the Old Republic, and they lost the license. Or there was some discussion of the license. They're like, well, like that meme with Bender, I'm going to go make my own, right? And they just decided, well, we'll make our own science fantasy. And I think that theirs, now granted, theirs holds together better because it's been made, like Star Wars started in the 70s, and they weren't trying to make something super rigorous, and Mass Effect was. But the world building just holds together better.
Yeah, and some of the characters, the writing is, it's BioWare, classic BioWare. And if I'm remembering correctly, one of the planets in Mass Effect actually is the planet from Dragon Age.
Right.
So they've tied in their 2 different franchises, which is cool. But no, I have so many wonderful memories with the characters and in the world of Mass Effect that in some ways it was almost like a Star Wars experience for video games.
I think it's supposed to feel that way. It's just different enough to be their own thing, which is really cool. What made you decide you wanted to write science fiction? As one of the best-selling fantasy authors of our time.
Well, I grew up reading it, and I love it as much as fantasy, and also just as a human, I love daydreaming about the future that I hope humanity is going to have out among the stars. It would be a very sad thing if we remain bound to this planet for the rest of time. Also, we know for a certainty that eventually the sun's going to expand and boil the oceans and kill everything on this planet. So we are literally the only hope life has on this planet of surviving. If we don't get off this planet, we're going to doom everything. And humanity is never going to just lay down and die. You know, we're not that type of species. So I wanted to dream about it. If there were a spaceship that were available to take me out to explore this universe, I would take it tomorrow. With my family.
Yeah. Why?
How about you?
Oh, me? It's kind of the same thing. Though I've never really wanted to To Sleep is space opera, but it's a step harder than anything I've written as hard science fiction goes. I've always kind of loved the blended sci-fi fantasy. I don't know that I see myself writing straight science fiction. It's always going to be the stuff like one of my movies, despite some very serious problems with it, one of my favorite movies is The Fifth Element.
Yeah.
And what I love about that is you've got these like space priests that are just hanging out and doing stuff. And I like that blending of like mythology and lore and science fiction. And so
that brings me to one of my other favorite properties, since you're talking about that exact thing.
Okay.
Which would be Babylon 5.
Okay.
Which managed to blend space elves and mythology with science fiction.
Well, we can talk about that, but we'll also mention, let's see, my number, we're jumping up, but we're skipping one of mine, but we'll get back to it. I did put Star Wars on my list. Star Wars is number 3. It's below Mass Effect that Star Wars inspired. This is not, again, ranking my enjoyment of the property, it's my enjoyment of the world building. And the reason that Star Wars was one rung underneath it for me is that I feel like, Star Wars kind of accidented into most of it, which happens with a lot of these early properties. Yeah. And I would also say Star Wars continuity has been a huge mess, and world building has been a huge mess lately. Yeah. I would say that the recent films, not like, you can bend story, like worlds. You got to be able to do new things. But I really feel like they just didn't care about the world building.
No.
And that bothered me.
At one point, I'm slightly. Actually, I shouldn't be ashamed of admitting it to this audience in particular. At one point, I owned every single Star Trek and Star Wars novel. But this was.
There's a lot of Star Trek novels.
Yeah, I owned all of them, and I'd read all of them. Eventually, I donated them to our local library, so they now have like the largest collection of Star Trek novels in rural Montana. But that really bothered me when they threw out all the old continuity with the Star Wars expanded universe.
The old continuity I felt was stronger.
It was more cohesive.
It was
more
from
a world building standpoint.
Despite it being kind of all over the place. There was a mess in the EU, but there was also kind of a respect. And I don't like they just throw out rules, they throw them out the window, and Star Wars is a mess. It is absolutely a mess, but it's a fun mess when it's working. It's a lovable mess. Right. But we should talk about Babylon 5. So Babylon 5, I didn't get into as much as all of my friends did when I was younger. I later watched some of it and got a good appreciation for it. But when it was during its first run, I never, for whatever reason, didn't get into it.
So you've never watched the whole thing?
I have never watched the whole thing.
So it was one of those things where I bounced off it once or twice, and it's because it's so arc-based, and it was one of the first big shows to do that. You really have to sort of invest in it and really sign up for the long haul. And then the development of the characters and the world is surprisingly consistent. And that's shouldn't be a surprise because J. Michael Straczynski wrote the vast majority of episodes himself, which has never been done before or since for a major show like that, because it'd be insane to write all the episodes yourself. But I love the world building and I love the characters. And I think that one of the things that holds it back from perhaps a wider audience these days is the effects. Sadly,
we're not dated.
And they weren't preserved by the studio, so they looked better than they actually do now when they first aired.
I almost got to make a show with Michael Straczynski.
Same, actually.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the story off stage.
Yeah, yeah. We don't have time for it right now, but got close. But things in Hollywood, everything's close. It may not have actually been that close. Everything's close, but nothing ever gets made. Was Star Trek on your list anywhere?
It was, and I would say Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
And
Deep Space Nine has the best world building, I feel like. It was my honorable mention. Deep Space Nine is my favorite Star Trek. It didn't make it just because the world building just didn't quite get to the levels of the others. Like, I think if I'm going to sit down and watch something, I will probably pick Star Trek over Star Wars for narrative and for just kind of that optimism and things like that. But with my focus, I'm like world building focused, I actually put Star Wars above it. I just, I like space wizards. I really like space wizards.
And by the way, there are space wizards in Babylon 5.
Yes.
They're techno mages.
But there's not a lot of space wizards. The closest we get is Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Where we have various weirdnesses going on. But
Definitely.
I just like my space wizards, so yeah. Well, let's jump back to my number 4 then, before we get to my number 1. So my number 4, I figured I wanted another video game on here, and it's Horizon Zero Dawn.
No, I've never played that.
Or Horizon, there's 2 of them, so Forbidden West, but yeah. Why I picked this is I'm looking strictly at world building for sci-fi. I also like new things. I like when you're audacious in your world building. And Horizon, if you've never played it, it's...
I know the story.
Yeah, it's like robot dinosaurs in a post-apocalyptic Earth that people are hunting for their spare parts with bows and arrows designed specifically to hunt robot dinosaurs. And it's a real unique blend of science fiction and fantasy. And it is science fiction, but you've got the fantasy sort of trappings and things like that. It's world built really interestingly, and it was a blast to play. And so I put that on my list. It didn't make my top video games ever, but where world building is concerned, I think it absolutely does.
So my sort of pairing with The Expanse, for example. Yeah. I'm kind of interested. You didn't mention this. I'd be curious. Your thoughts would be Battlestar Galactica, the reboot.
So here's the thing, I didn't see it.
Oh.
Yeah. So what happened is Battlestar Galactica, there's like a hole in my viewing that happened when I was really working hard to break in. And I just did not watch a lot of television during that time.
Yeah.
Because of that. I did watch Firefly, all 13 or 12 episodes, which I love, like a lot of people. But that era, I just didn't see a lot of the shows that were happening.
Yeah, I think the world building's solid. It gets a little sloppy later on, just like Lost. But the biggest complaint I have with that show actually is it has basically a complete lack of humor. And it could have used a couple of jokes here or there. But
what's your opinion on Lost?
I think that it was superb storytelling for a large portion of the show because it just pulled you through, and that's what storytelling is about, and it had good characters. But later on, they had trouble wrapping up some of the lore and the setting.
So I got kicked out of Lost when a lot of people did during the kind of writer strike era, where it felt like season 1 was just fantastic, and then a big portion of season 2. But I will tell you, my least favorite thing that television shows do, drives me up the wall, is resetting character arcs.
Yeah.
And so mild spoilers for Lost, when they reset Charlie's character arc, when he's regressed, and I know it's actually a very realistic thing for a drug addict, but there was that, and then Mr. Echo died, and then and some things were happening in there, and then I hear it gets really good again.
It does.
Starting in the 3rd or 4th season.
I think it's season 4. I think season 3 was the rough one, and then...
Is season 4 the flash forwards one?
I can't remember.
But I hear it gets really good when the flash forwards start.
But the problem is those seasons seasons are full-length seasons. I mean, it's like 23, 26 episodes. It's a huge commitment. Like, my wife watched Next Generation for the first time a couple of years ago, and, you know, each season's like 24, 26 episodes, and it's a big commitment of time. And that's part of the problem getting into something like Battlestar Galactica or something else. So
let's jump to my number one.
Yeah.
And do my number one, then we can do your number one. And my number one is Dune. It was a miniseries. It counts. I never watched the miniseries because everyone said it was bad.
It was.
But it counts because by the definition, it had to have a show. No big surprise here. My favorite science fiction book is Dune. And my favorite world building in any format is Dune. And so by the technicality of the Sci-Fi show existing,
I love that.
I can talk about how much I love the book and the new movie. So I just absolutely love the world building of Dune. It is that, again, perfect blend. Again, it's science fiction that's using some fantasy trappings. Where I tend to write fantasy that uses some science fiction trappings. But I love, you got basically your space wizards. They're just, the Bene Gesserit are space witches. And you've got just a really interesting use, of mythology and culture and lore. You've got world building where the economics and the governmental systems and the topography are all inexorably linked in ways that just connects them all together. It is so fascinating and so well done and so interesting.
Have you ever taken a look at The 7 Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence?
I have, yes.
First time I glanced at it, which is available for free online, I was like, I started reading the first page. I was like, oh, that's where Frank Herbert's writing style came from. It actually makes a wonderful companion piece for Dune, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And Dune has this thing that the later books, which I enjoy all of. Let's put that out there. Are not as approachable as the first one, and the second one works, but then people are giant sandworm grubs, and
it was weird.
And it is weird. It is super weird.
So speaking of weird, I wasn't going for world building, but speaking of weird, my number one choice, and this really is my number one choice, would be the original Prisoner television show.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
Now that's interesting.
And I actually think this is the most prophetic piece of science fiction in a lot of ways, because it deals with, loss of privacy and individuality, the strength of the individual against the system of government.
What's that thing he yells? I am not a number. I am a free man.
I will not be stamped, numbered, indexed. I forget the entire thing. Yeah, I'm a free man.
So I didn't, obviously, neither of us would have watched it during its original run back in the 70s, I assume.
Yeah.
But I did catch it in reruns. After my freshman year of college, I went home and lived for 3 months before going back out. And during those 3 months, it was on reruns. It's actually kind of funny because it was The Prisoner, and then it was Hercules, the Legend Continues, or whatever, the Kevin Sorbo Hercules.
Yeah.
And I watched those back to back.
What an interesting combo.
Yes.
And the cool thing too is that I think the Prisoner is definitely an auteur piece. It was written by Patrick McGoohan, who also stars in it, and who he also directed the majority of episodes. And it directly follows from his earlier series, Secret Agent Man.
Okay. Yeah.
When that show ended, he was at a party and with some governmental officials, and someone asked him, so what does a secret agent do when he retires? And he said, I don't know. You tell me, what does a secret agent do when he retires? And the bureaucrat just kind of goes, well, we take care of them. And that was kind of the beginning of the concept for the show. A lot of people hate the ending. I actually quite like the ending, but there's a sense of absurdity to the show as well that I think is very well suited for the nature of modern life, given that although we live in a Heinlein future in the sense we have rockets, taking off and landing vertically, as God in Heinlein intended, at the same time, we live in a very strange modern life, and Philip K. Dick captured that, but I also think The Prisoner absolutely did. So if you haven't seen The Prisoner, I can't recommend it enough. personally.
It's I would call it a precursor to Lost also, because it's all about the mystery of what's going on with him, why he's there, what's going on behind the scenes.
And I'd say the difference, though, is McGowan had some really strong philosophy driving it underneath. He was a very religious man and had some very strong, actually very similar to Gene Wolfe, both Catholic, and that drove a lot of his beliefs and approach to the material.
Well, awesome. Thank you, Christopher.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you guys
pleasure.
for being such an awesome audience.
Thank you.